Sorry you didn't get your story.
That's alright. There'll be other stories. You still owe me one.
I'm good for it.
In April of 2009, I happened to discover Uncharted Drake's Fortune on a school trip to France, and when I beat it 3 days later, was left blown away. I felt hooked to this story, intrigued by the mystery and attached to its characters. As a 14-year-old kid, still relatively new to console gaming, rarely had I played a game that personally connected with me on this level before. Naturally, my first move after watching the credits roll was to look up if there was any word of a sequel, and to my delight, I learned it had just been announced months ago. Uncharted 2 Among Thieves would be Naughty Dog's most ambitious project yet, promising to bring the franchise to new heights in every regard. With a PS3 in my possession for a short while now, I'd finally dipped my toes into the world of gaming, learning about the industry and a giant event in June that was about to take place. The Sony press conference at E3 2009 was an unforgettable experience, opening with that one unforgettable game. An action-packed demo showed Nathan Drake shooting his way through a destroyed city, chased by a helicopter and escaping from a collapsing building on the brink of death. It marked the first time where I would feel genuine excitement for a game yet to come out, and in the months that followed, I'd look up every detail I could find in anticipation. My expectations were sky high, yet upon release, the impossible had happened. It managed to outdo them in every single way. Uncharted 2 Among Thieves raised the bar for interactive storytelling, featured the most stunning presentation, lively characters, and flawlessly blended in action set pieces with its engaging narrative. Winning over 200 Game of the Year awards and holding Naughty Dog's highest Metacritic score to this date, it set a new golden standard for any sequel that was yet to come out. It was the success PlayStation 3 had desperately needed, and proved to be a turning point for the platform later on. But much more importantly, Uncharted 2 left a massive impact on me, and became my favorite game of all time. I can't believe how much time has flown by. Today, on October 13th, it's officially been 10 years since the release that changed it all. To celebrate together with you, I'd love to relive that experience once more.
That's my blood. That's my blood. It's a lot of my blood.
Uncharted 2 kicks off with a bang. The opening scene immediately sets the stage for an adventure much more ambitious and grander in scope. Not that Drake's Fortune hadn't been well received, but if one critique had stood out, it would be that the experience offered felt rather compact. Once again, we begin with a quote, this time around by Marco Polo, raising a sense of intrigue, citing he did not tell half of what he saw, for he knew he would not be believed. This is followed up with the reveal of a banged up Drake covered in blood, who realizes he's sitting in the middle of a train cart hanging off the cliffs in the Himalayas. I touched on it already in my video about the first Uncharted, but this is one thing I think the intro sequences in this series pull off so well. They put you in the middle of the action and try to get you on board for the ride before providing much context, which could otherwise feel slow and boring to get through. Uncharted 2's opening remains to be the perfect role model in this regard. It gets you theorizing about what could have possibly happened, and this question will remain in the back of your head for half of the game. Now, you can hardly fail this particular level. Drake is stuck to the train like a magnet, and so it's perfect as a tutorial for the climbing mechanics, including some elements like swinging which were new to this entry. What made Drake such a relatable character in the previous game stands out here once again. He's a human being who can visually be seen in pain and react cynically, blaming himself for always managing to end up in these unfortunate circumstances. After an epic last jump out of the train, Drake takes a quick moment to rest on top of the mountain peak, where the screen fades to white and we are finally disclosed some details about the events that took place prior.
Buy me a drink, sailor.
Harry Flynn? Hey! What the hell are you doing here?
I'm looking for you, mate.
Uh-oh. Should I be flattered or worried?
This scene sets up the adventure and introduces us to two entirely new characters. Harry Flynn is an old business associate of Drake, who approaches him with a risky job offering to steal an old oil lamp in a Turkish museum. Although this strikes Drake as odd at first, Flynn then reveals an old piece of writing he discovered in the files of his secret client, and they figure out that what his client is really after is the lost fleet of Marco Polo, rumored to have carried lots of treasure on board. Drake has seemingly broken into this place before and realizes that the job requires more than two people, which is where Chloe Fraser comes into play. Chloe and Drake have history, but she doesn't want Flynn to know that, which throws Drake off guard in the beginning. The subtitle for this game is called Among Thieves for a reason, as this game really wanted to sell us on the idea that nobody can be fully trusted in this world. There will be more examples for that later. Now, initially, the setup may come off as somewhat shocking to players of the first game who are left wondering what happened to Sully and Elena. Creative director Amy Hennig always made it clear how much she valued the idea of newcomers being able to jump into each subsequent release without feeling left out, while making the experience richer for the hardcore fan. In that regard, this scene works well for both audiences, giving everyone a chance to understand the plot while raising even more questions for fans in the meantime. But hey, at least Drake is back and he certainly seems in for the ride.
You in then?
What the hell? I mean, what could possibly go wrong?
The remainder of the first chapter is spent on finding a way back past the train wreck, not knowing where exactly you're headed to, while interchanging with another flashback. It reveals Drake's romantic history with Chloe, and the two make a secret plan to leave Flynn behind when the treasure is split 3 ways. You find a mysterious dagger left behind in the snow, and this is where a definitive transition puts you into the museum heist, at which point the game will no longer flash forward anymore. Coming off of Drake's fortune, where you'd been trapped in that single never-ending jungle, all these new interesting switches in scenery and dynamic ways of storytelling immediately represented such a drastic shift from what we were used to. The second chapter of the game is a relatively long one, in part because it is used to introduce Among Thieves' major new gameplay component, stealth. You gradually go from taking down a single guard to being let loose in an open courtyard where you have more freedom to choose your own approach. Not that stealth is too dynamic, getting spotted always means having to finish the fight in gunfire, and thus in this case trial and error, but Uncharted wants to keep the pace up and the story moving, so I've never been bothered by it one bit. Satisfaction is found in the wide range of possible eliminations, handing out a massive blow from behind, pulling enemies down ledges or smashing their heads into cover. The character banter makes this level fantastic too. From the expression on Flynn's face when Drake asks him to take initiative, his remarks on how Drake should stop eating donuts after failing a jump, to Drake's frustration when his in-like Flynn joke doesn't land. Oh, and then there's the following one.
There's a guy above you, there's a guy above you. There's a
guy below you. There's a guy below you.
I still remember hearing this, panicking for a split second and nervously looking down until I realized what had just happened and I burst out in laughter. Moments like these, of video game writing that requires you to think outside of the box, have come to form such a big part of Uncharted's identity. The duo eventually use tranquilizer guns to safely make their way towards the tower they're trying to reach. They find and shatter the oil lamp, find clues pointing towards Borneo, which is when Flynn reveals it turns out he's got a plan of his own. His betrayal may have seemed somewhat obvious in hindsight, but Naughty Dog had done a good job convincing us otherwise. For example, every trailer limited his appearances to those where he worked together with Drake, and even the multiplayer beta made sure to put his character on the hero side. Drake tries to escape the place, dodging lasers left and right, but is unfortunately caught by the gods, where the game jumps forward a couple of months and it's time for a much anticipated reunion.
Face it, genius, you've been played. Oh, really? Hey! Jackass, you're ruining the show here.
Ah, what a shame.
Sully!
I really can't leave you alone for a minute.
Oh, man, am I glad to see you.
How you doing, kid?
I'm doing just great.
So, had to grease a few palms. Did go through the rest of your money and a good chunk of my own, but hey. Jesus, you stink.
Yeah, not half as bad as that cigar. Hey, how'd you find me?
Well, a friend of yours asked for my help.
Hello, Nate.
Oh, no. No.
Now, wait a second.
Sully, kick her out and shut the door. We're safer in here.
Just wait a goddamn minute. Hear her out.
Thank you, Victor.
Hey, no offense, Sully, but you're not exactly the best judge of character, especially when it comes to women.
Fair enough. All the same.
Dear God.
Oh, no, it's not that bad. Look, I have my own bucket. Last cell I was in, 8 of us had to share.
Sully is back, buys Drake his freedom, and we're off to Borneo to visit the dig site. Borneo provokes a bit of a back to the roots feeling. Not only do you return to the all too familiar jungle for a while, but attentive players will notice it even exclusively uses the soundtrack from the first game here. With Sully once again by your side, it really started to dawn on me here. I'm actually playing the sequel to Drake's Fortune. How awesome does it feel to be back?
Here it is.
I also left the detonator for you.
There we are.
All right. First one set. Don't touch the button.
This one?
Borneo looks visually impressive, and only now you're really able to draw a comparison to the graphics of the predecessor. Combat finally gets reintroduced, and you could say Borneo forms the final tutorial level before you've got all the basics down. There are plenty of opportunities where you're gonna need it, but most of these scenarios allow you to thin out the battlefield first by sneaking up on enemies and snapping their necks. Probably the biggest missed opportunity of Among Thieves, which most players will agree on, is how little Sully is actually present in this game. Apart from a small reappearance by the end, Borneo essentially presents his only chance to shine. Impressively enough, within that short time frame, he manages to leave that lasting impact here, delivering nearly all of his most memorable lines in the entire series in these 2 chapters alone.
I'm sweating like a hooker in church.
You brought a hooker to church?
Why not?
After your first small peek at the antagonist, Zoran Lazarevic, you blow up his camp and make your way to the mountain, lighting up the resin you find and walking among hundreds of corpses, crew members of Marco Polo who appear to have killed each other. Drake finds the Furba dagger in possession of one of these skeletons, along with a map of Nepal, though he can't resist taking advantage of the opportunity to mess with his bodies first.
Almighty.
Just kidding.
Nate, you're gonna give me a goddamn heart attack.
However, they are ambushed by Flynn, who pulls off an accurate impression of Victor Goddamn Sullivan, after which Drake and Sully escape, while Chloe keeps up her double agent act. Let's just say it's quite the turn of events. In Uncharted tradition, Sully comes to the realization here that he's getting too old for this shit, and wishes Drake well on his journey to Nepal.
See you in hell, kid!
Shit.
Now, so much for the adventure before the actual adventure. The way I see it, everything up until now is essentially a large introductory segment, both in narrative build-up and to your range of gameplay components. Chapter 5 in Nepal brings that to an end and marks a turning point for Uncharted 2. From this moment on, the stage is set, and more importantly, the game completely stops jumping ahead in time until the very end. Something which both the first and second Uncharted game nail, more so than their sequels in my opinion, is that they naturally progress from one location to the next. As a result, this adventure feels like a journey you get to experience along with Drake almost every step of the way, a detail often underappreciated but of such added value if you'd ask me. Funnily enough, people would tend to view this as a negative in Uncharted 1. Being stuck on a single island, it simply meant environments lacked variety. Fortunately, everyone seemed to unanimously agree that Among Thieves gets it right by picking the perfect setting, and also my favorite one in the entire series. I'll revisit this idea once we get a bit further ahead in the story. Drake is looking for a specific temple within the city, but with Flynn and his client possessing the same information, they've stirred up a civil war within the region and have begun blasting their way through in this area, destroying every temple they can find. Thinking back to the standards of 10 years ago, Naughty Dog did an incredible job at selling this idea to you. Streets and buildings are littered with books, debris and crashed vehicles blocking your path. Enemy soldiers patrol the area, accompanied by helicopters and armored trucks, and resistance fighters are occasionally seen fighting for their lives. Via a lantern post, you swing into what's left of a house's bathroom. It comes crashing down, revealing the main floor flooded by water, and the car crashed into its walls, forcing Drake to deliver live commentary on the spot.
Nice parking job.
Graphically, the game still holds up to this day, of course even more so thanks to Bluepoint, who did an amazing job remastering the trilogy to PS4. Making your way through the city is absolutely my favorite part of the game, swinging across flagpoles, exploring a hotel and finding the power switch to free Chloe trapped within a broken elevator. Upon reaching the roof, there is this large swimming pool which I doubt anyone can resist to jump into on their first playthrough. Once again, the character interaction shines in these occasions, simultaneously rewarding you with not just one, but 2 in-game achievements as long as you show enough persistence.
Hey, check it out. Marco!
Really?
Come on!
No.
Marco!
Hello.
Fish out of water!
You are so unprofessional.
But evident is that one particular aspect took the forefront when Naughty Dog asked how they could one-up themselves with this installment, increasing the amount of spectacle. The helicopter chase is a primary example. Many games would tend to run into the same problem. Their core gameplay mechanics usually didn't fit with gigantic moments like this, so as a solution they'd either have to resort to QuickTime events or they'd simply play them out via cutscenes. Game director Bruce Straley spearheaded Uncharted 2's core philosophy to always put the player in control during these segments, enhancing your immersion all the more. The helicopter destroys the walls around you as you navigate your way through the building, eventually causing it to collapse, forcing you to fight several guards as office desks come flying at you, but you jump your way out just in time.
Jump! We were almost in that.
Situations like this can be pretty intense, but Drake always lightens up the mood with his habit to make jokes on the brink of death. Key here is also how Drake's behavior is meant to reflect the player's mood. As soon as you make your way out, a massive weight feels lifted off your shoulders. Suddenly you're overwhelmed by silence, emphasized upon by the clock you can hear ticking in the background, and Drake himself is seen catching his breath until you decide to move the stick forward again. But the helicopter itself hasn't been dealt with yet, which you take care of using a grenade launcher right after. Chloe and Drake end up separated again for a short while, so Drake can meet an unexpected previous partner of his.
Whoa, hey, don't shoot!
Hey! Nate? What the hell are you doing here? Jack, don't!
Wait, you know this guy?
Yeah, This is Drake.
Oh.
Elena's reappearance may seem like it came falling out of the sky, and you might have to suspend your disbelief somewhat to buy that she was there at the right place and the right time. But story-wise, it creates just the bit of conflict that was needed. The two women are both completely taken by surprise with Drake's romantic choices, and for a short while, a love triangle commences, where Chloe and Elena constantly compete to come across more confident and important, with Drake stuck in the middle. Cameraman Jeff awkwardly joins along, adding unnecessary comments whenever they're least needed.
So let me get this straight. You're competing with a psychopathic war criminal for a mythological gemstone?
When you put it that way, it does sound pretty stupid. Yeah, thanks for the input, Jeff.
In my opinion, one thing is for sure, all of the cast actors were the perfect picks for their roles. The chemistry shared amongst them is visible, even more so once you start watching the making of material on disc, which I would do all the time. In here, they talk about the loose process, being allowed to improvise and joke around. Naughty Dog had made advancements in their already great motion capture technology, now able to record sound on set and not having to replace every line of dialogue doing voiceover sessions from a booth.
I remember calling you a tired old sack of shit, and then we started filming. But remember that? What was your full character's name?
Victor Sullivan.
Victor Sullivan, right? So I would go, Victor, goddamn Sullivan! So we were doing callbacks to the goddamn thing, too. Yeah.
I hear that laugh in my sleep.
Because he's right there.
Thankfully for Chloe, she manages to drag Nate into the temple they were trying to find, leaving Jeff and Elena alone in the meantime. The temple offers a challenge for pilgrims with the golden passport to discover Shambhala, which brings us to the puzzles in this game. Compared to Drake's Fortune, they are relatively scarce in Uncharted 2, though they come in two different categories now. The dedicated ones are rather uncreative. All they require you to do is to look at your notebook and place objects in the correct position they belong. Next to these, there are also environmental challenges, much more fun to go through, as well as bigger in scope. Hands down, my favorite one is the Path of Light. In here, you have to adjust several reflectors, beaming off light so it travels to the desired destination. As you progress through the puzzle, huge blades of the Furba dagger will come down in the middle, which you have to climb up in order to advance. Drake and Chloe find the location of Shambhala, mark it on their map, and fight their way back out. Jeff has been shot, forcing you to carry him through a chaotic level full of explosions and gunfire. This creates even more tension with Chloe, who never wanted to drag these two journalists along in the first place, but Drake had insisted and can't crawl back now. The group is eventually trapped, where the main villain Lazarevich at last comes eye to eye with Drake and makes his powerful entrance.
So, this little man is Drake. Did you carry him all the way from the temple? Shame.
Here's the thing, in almost any other game I would have considered Lazarevich a bad villain. Technically, he's just a one-dimensional warlord seeking power, downright vicious in his quest to get what he wants. Rise of the Tomb Raider was a perfect example, seemingly creating a carbon copy of his character who, because of his appearance and voice delivery, I had a hard time taking seriously at all. However, Graham McTavish's performance is so convincing, enabling Lazarevich to come across as frightening yet sporadically amusing in a twisted way that I could only absolutely love his character. Chloe gets taken back, Lazarevich rediscovers the trail, while Elena and Drake escape in a very enjoyable chase encounter. We learn that the feelings they had for each other have never really left, and together they plan to get Drake on the enemy train so he can rescue a friend he owes quite the apology to. Slowly but surely, the thought should hit you that the events of the intro must be very, very close.
So, how do you plan on getting her off that speeding train?
Haven't thought that far ahead.
Of course not.
Okay, here we go.
No, hold on.
course, this is it. Ask anyone to name their most memorable part of Uncharted 2 and 9 out of 10 times you'll hear them utter the exact same words. The train level felt revolutionary at the time. Tricking the player through infinite and mirrored environmental loops, Naughty Dog cleverly created the sense that this train's trajectory was ongoing while you tried to reach the front. So much for the technical side, but what makes this level truly stand out is just how fun and spectacular it is. You don't just fight some guys and hop from one quad onto the next, obstacles force you to duck down, you can trick enemy soldiers into getting hit by them. A helicopter eventually chases you, blowing up the quad behind you as the train enters a tunnel just in time.
Thank God for tunnels!
Picking off enemies with a sniper rifle from a long distance requires skill while the train goes around bends and moves unexpectedly. After a short while, the tunnel reaches its end, revealing a significant shift in scenery as we're crossing the border to Tibet. Now this brings me back to that natural progression between chapters that I love so much about this game. Uncharted 2 finds the perfect approach to make each part feel different and unique without the need to jump all over the world or skip ahead in time. Having traveled all the way through Nepal, exploring its city and temples now brings you to Tibet, covered in snow and full of unique new places you'll explore. With your own eyes, you get to see how Drake ends up in all these places, enhancing the sense that you're on this long, difficult journey all the more. This would later become one of my biggest problems with Uncharted 3, which felt like it was designed completely around a desire to include a large range of locations and set pieces, but as a result was forced to jump all over the place. Eventually, you get to finally destroy the helicopter using a turret and have a mini-boss fight with Draza, Lazarevich's lieutenant. Once Drake reaches Chloe near the front court, it appears she's still pissed, pointing out she never wanted him to come rescue her in the first place. Flint pops up, shoots Drake in the hip, and the events leading up to the intro are ultimately revealed.
Put him out of his misery!
From a developer's perspective, going with this cliffhanger opening now presents a dilemma. Do we repeat the same level or do we skip ahead in time? Both decisions would come with their negatives. Replaying it would be rather dull, leaving it out might feel jarring for those who pick the game back up after a while. It turns out the solution is to take the best of both worlds. To prevent rehashing the same sequence, things get spiced up. Drake now makes comments about the story so far you initially hadn't heard about, a large chunk inside the train climbing up on its seats now happens automatically, and camera angles are also switched around. As soon as you make it to the top, we fast forward to Drake finding the Ferber dagger in the snow, where soldiers show up looking for the same item. Maybe a bit unconvincingly, Drake only starts struggling to maintain his conscience after the fight has ended, collapsing in the snow as he is found by a stranger just in time. You end up in a small Tibetan village, rescued by Tenzin, a Tibetan native who neither you nor Drake can therefore understand. He leads you around, allowing for a moment to breathe and relax, meeting other inhabitants, playing around with the children in town, and patting all the yaks for those glorious achievements. You reunite with Elena and meet Carl Schaefer, a former German Nazi who led an expedition to find Shambhala and the Chintamani stone before. However, learning about its true powers, Schaefer killed all of his fellow soldiers, getting severely wounded in the process, and arrived at the village similarly near death. To convince Drake of the need to stop Lazarevich, he sends him along with Tenzin into the ice caves to find the proof. People easily tend to forget what impact this level had. Not only is it a nice breakup from all the action so far, and is the art direction absolutely gorgeous in this part, Tenzin himself is the star of the show. It's probably the first time in a game where I felt a genuine connection to a character I otherwise couldn't understand. Drake conveys this sentiment perfectly, joking around every so often about the unfortunate language barrier.
What's it say? Why do I ask?
Drake and Tenzin's relationship would actually go on to inspire Naughty Dog's core idea behind The Last of Us. Having two characters completely new to each other form a strong bond over time. Working together is a blast, jumping across huge distances and helping each other along until you reach the massive statue as platforms rise out of the water in a beautiful cinematic way. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I still remember being somewhat afraid Uncharted 2 would include a supernatural element like its predecessor did. The mutants in Drake's Fortune had terrified me to no end, and this far into the game, I'd almost begun celebrating the fact the coast was looking pretty clear. Lo and behold, through a clever visual trick, I experienced a brief moment of shock, realizing the party was short-lived. Now, thankfully, the Yetis couldn't quite match the same scare factor, but unlike the mutants, it's their sheer power which makes them come off as a giant threat. For a long time, they appear literally invincible to gunfire. Your only alternative is to hold them off by running gunning until you're eventually able to escape from them in the two respective situations. Making their way out of the caves, the Tibetan village appears to be on fire, and Drake realizes it's already too late. What follows is an action-packed race through the village, defending its civilians from enemy gunfire, in search for rocket launchers to take down a massive tank. The real cause for Lazarevich's ambush was to find the dagger. It's in Carl Schaefer's possession, who he's taken with him and is now holding captive. In an attempt to rescue Schaefer and stop Lazarevich, Drake says goodbye to Tenzin and chases the army down with Elena.
Alright, they must have taken him in the lead car.
We gotta stop him before Lazarevich gets a hold of him.
Alright, I have an idea.
Well, what are you doing?
I'm gonna clear the road. Here, take the wheel.
What?
Just take it.
Why didn't you just let me drive in the first place?
I didn't think that far ahead.
Yeah.
Alright, hold it steady.
Okay.
That's good. Alright, here we go. A little closer. There you go.
Hang on!
Uncharted 2's convoy sequence would start a tradition continued in each subsequential release. Being able to jump from one vehicle onto the other, it was your task to take down each enemy, later taking control of a turret to blow them up one by one. Uncharted is meant to be over the top, yet I think it conveys its action moments believably enough for you to take it very seriously. For that reason, this truck segment sadly contains the only scene in the game so jarring it always breaks my immersion a bit, because there is absolutely no way Drake and Elena could have survived from the way we see them dive off the cliff by the end.
Ah, that's right, you bastards! We got you now! Oh, crap!
There's no way they survived that. Let's go.
Come on. Just like old times, huh?
You could say that. So now what?
We end up in a monastery, another visually impressive locale, though simultaneously my least favorite part of the game. Developers had a habit, to be honest they still do to this day, to extend the playtime of their campaigns by overly drawing out its last hours with lengthy combat encounters near the end. Uncharted 2 falls for the same trap because, in my opinion, the Monastery is the only level in the game which would have benefited from having a few of its many gunfights cut. Speaking of combat, now nearing the end of the campaign, the most satisfying weapons become a more common sight. From the Gao machine gun, that incredible sounding M4 assault rifle, and the crossbow, enemies become more powerful, so you do too. Uncharted 2 did a good job expanding the range of weapons and equipment at your disposal, including your ability to use riot shields and throw propane tanks. The new melee system was a welcome addition too, getting rid of that frustrating brutal combo and making fights more cinematic by letting you dodge opponents' moves with the triangle button in between. Don't get me wrong, the Monastery certainly has its moments, like seeing the tower collapse after you snipe the rocket launcher guy within, or the intense bridge set piece, but usually I'm glad whenever I finally made my way through. I do love how Greg Edmondson's fantastic music takes on a darker tone here. It strikes a feeling of inevitability, making you realize the end must be close as you hear the ominous sounds of Tibetan horns. A staircase hidden in plain sight hides the secret entrance to Shambhala. Pressured by Lazarevich, Drake sets off one more time with Flynn to find a way across a blocked pathway. It's a nice callback, contrasting the museum heist, now that the duo have become full-on rivals and are trying their best to one-up each other and coming up with the most offensive insults.
Come on, girly girl. There you go. Statue of your mom.
But there is also a callback to the first game. Fighting the Yetis with Harry Flynn is very reminiscent to how you fended off the mutants with Eddie Raja at your side, though the outcome is a much different one this time around. The Yetis are killed and the doors to Shambhala opened up.
Open the gate!
Shambhala looks even more beautiful than I had imagined it. It's a city that is asking to be fully explored, but sadly you barely get the time to take it in. Filled with Lazarevich's men as well as purple guardians who disguise themselves as the Yetis in the real world, it's a race against the clock for who finds the stone first. While the road to find this place took too long for my liking, I wish the game had allowed me to stay just a little longer here. I do love the sense of progression you can feel in Shambhala. The weather starts off sunny and the city appears colorful, but grows ever darker as you make your way through. Crossbows prove your best friend against the Guardians, and the last big fight in the game places you in a large room with all teams pointed at each other. I still have nightmares thinking back to the numerous times I die here on crushing and brutal difficulty. Drake learns that there was never a real Chintamani stone all along, rather it's the resin from the Tree of Life, which grants people supernatural powers. Lazarevich is already seen on his way, and Flynn shows up with one last surprise.
Flynn, listen to me.
Parting gift from Lazarevich. Pity he took the pin.
Get back!
Elena!
No.
Oh my god.
Helena! Okay, you're gonna be okay. Come on, we're gonna get you out of here. Come on.
Stop, Lazarevich, go!
Not a chance. Come on.
With Elena gravely injured and Chloe looking after her, Drake has to make his way to fight Lazarevich alone. The boss battle can be frustratingly hard on the higher difficulties, but there is no denying it's a huge step up from the trial and error quicktime fest in Drake's Fortune. Lazarevich is near immortal, so your only chance at damaging him is by shooting the sap around the area so it explodes right next to him. A total of 4 phases make the battle increasingly more challenging, as grenades get thrown at you and the ground starts shaking because the entire cities become unstable. Finally having defeated Lazarevich, he confronts Drake with a last speech.
Lazarevich! You think I am a monster? But you're no different from me, Drake. How many men have you killed? How many just today? That's it, boy. No compassion, no mercy. Huh? Do it! No. You don't have the will.
Maybe not. But they do.
Shambhala comes crashing down, and after a last escape sequence running from a collapsing bridge, you make your way out, while Elena has to fight for her life. Although initially tricking you into thinking she's passed away, the opposite turns out to be the case. Sully shows up, naturally needs confirmation that there was no giant sapphire after all, and leaves the stage in style, chasing Chloe for reasons. Having paid a last tribute to Schaefer, Drake and Elena discuss where the future will take them.
So where do we go from here, huh?
I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead.
Of course not. But then again, neither have I.
Good.
So, on a scale of 1 to 10, how scared were you that I was gonna die?
4.
4?
Yeah, why?
A 4.
Yeah.
You were at least an 8.
An 8?
You were a total 8.
An 8? Those guardian things were an 8.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, those were terrifying.
What's a 10?
Clowns?
Clowns over my death?
I hate
Clowns?
clowns. I hate clowns.
Oh my word. You thought I was dead.
No.
No, you thought I was gone.
No,
Yes,
no.
you did.
No, I
saw
had you
you
all
shed
along.
tears. You shed a bunch of them.
Tears? It was raining.
No, it was not.
You were unconscious and it was
It
raining.
was totally sunny out and you were bawling.
It wasn't sunny. You were unconscious.
Whatever. I kept your tears in a jar. I have proof.
I'll give you 5. How's that?
And that marks the end of Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. Although I've treasured this game since the moment I first beat it, it's incredible to see how well the adventure still holds up. Awe-inspiring locations, fantastic character banter, memorable villains and standout set-piece moments continue to make this an unforgettable ride. But what truly defines Uncharted 2 for me is its pacing, one which never lets up and makes this game a blast to play from start to finish. Every chapter naturally transitions into the next one, and every moment of wonder and exploration is broken up by the next engaging story beat or high-octane action at the exact right time. In hindsight, later installments may have managed to improve in certain regards, but for me, Uncharted 2 remains the ultimate package that hasn't been beaten since. It is insane to realize that Naughty Dog was able to achieve this result in a development cycle of just 2 years alone. Yet nonetheless, every single facet of this game exhibits an amount of love and care put into it unseen in most other games. I didn't even get to touch on its underrated multiplayer and co-op modes, coming completely out of nowhere and proving everyone with concerns about potentially feeling tacked on wrong. Today could have also marked 10 years of an amazing ongoing online experience, but sadly it wasn't meant to be. To commemorate, I'd gladly like to refer you to the tribute video I made just weeks ago. In large part thanks to Uncharted 2, the PlayStation 3 was finally able to put its problematic past behind. Word of mouth spread fast and sales at last would begin to pick up. But forget Metacritic, forget the Game of the Year awards, and forget all the praise it received at the time. Uncharted 2's greatest accomplishment is how it continues to inspire games to this day. That seamless incorporation of storytelling and spectacle remains the ultimate goal, and it laid the foundation on which PlayStation has built out its massive story-driven single-player success today. A decade may have passed, but we'll remember Uncharted 2 Among Thieves for many more to come.